Hey everyone, good morning. Victoria Waco back here again, Mrs. New York American 2024. And today I'm going to be sharing a little bit more of my story. So first of all, thanks for everyone for the sweet comments, likes, all the things on my last video, kind of giving you an overview of my early experiences of trauma. In this video, originally I was going to jump ahead to my teen years because there's a lot that happened there too. But I think there were a couple of questions I wanted to answer first. And for this video specifically, I'm going to talk about the role of child protective services in my childhood because that's a question that comes up a lot. And I guess I want to start this video just with the reminder again that I'm really big into the idea that the system I was raised in pretty much overall, even later in my life, was just an unhealthy system. And what I mean by that is that everyone in that system was trying to survive and keep something true. In my early childhood, it was dealing with my mom's addiction, and later it's fantasies of like someone being good that isn't. And I think for me, one of the most important things is that they were good people who did things that good people you think don't do because of the structure we were all in, including myself, right? I would consider myself a good person. I'm going to tell you some parts of the story. Now, again, I was a child. Did I know better? Probably not, but it just, it is what it is, and it's part of my story, so I want to share it. So I can remember pretty early on as a kid, I was getting ready to go to kindergarten. I had gone to preschools and daycares on and off, not very consistently at all. That's another whole story about the importance of early childhood intervention programs because I didn't really have much. But I can't remember who it was. It was one of my two brothers who sat me down and told me, when they pull you out of class and they're going to ask you how things at home are, you just tell them everything's good. Everything's fine, that mom's fine, everything's great. Because if you don't, they will take you away from mom. And of course, any 5-6-year-old hearing the idea of having yourself taken away from your mom is traumatizing. On top of that, I will say, I had friends who had gone into foster care. Some had wonderful experience, some did not. But just the idea of like me being away from my mom was something that I couldn't imagine. I loved her so much, as every child loves their parents. And sure enough, it did happen. And there were plenty of times that I would sit in a little conference room, sometimes with my brother, sometimes without, and I would just kind of lie. And I don't think I truly understood that it was a lie. Like, to me, everything was fine at home. I didn't realize that I was not growing up in a safe environment. I didn't realize that not everyone finds needles in their house randomly or bent spoons by the stove. I didn't realize that not every parent, like, household had like random people showing up at random times and like in low talking to my mom in the other room because they're doing a drug deal. I didn't realize that other households didn't have like their mom showing up with bruises on them because she's getting beaten by people. Like, I just truly didn't know that wasn't what everyone else's household was, because to be honest, I wasn't around many other households, and the ones I were sometimes as dysfunctional as mine, right? So again, the system, I didn't really realize what I was doing was lying. And that was something that went on for a bit until I was 7. It would happen randomly, as always. Sometimes people would stop by the house. I was like moved, like a lot of times I wasn't home when the worst would happen. But yeah, so this is not a knock on CPS. I think they have a very important job. It was just simply like in my system, in my like corner of this world, like they were going to take me away from mom, and I had to do what I had to do to not make that happen, even as a kid. And that was a big weight on a kid. Same thing, and I don't talk about this a lot, I used to pee in cups for my mom. Didn't realize it was because she would fail her drug test, her drug test she had to do at points. But yeah, it was what was asked to keep the system going, and I did it. So I always like to kind of share that because I think sometimes it's hard to understand. Like, you'll hear some of my stories, you'll be like, well, how could you live in that so long? How come, the law enforcement didn't intervene? And they tried. But again, the idea of losing my mom, being away from my mom, not knowing who would be taking care of me was just the fear of the unknown was greater than, the trauma I was living in. And again, when it's your day-to-day life, like there was periods where I didn't realize how I was constantly in flight or fight response or fawn response. Like I was just always in it. There was not a moment where I wasn't growing up. And I didn't realize all that until later. I didn't realize why I was peeing into cups until much later on in life when it started to click. I didn't realize that we used to go to food banks until much later in life when I was helping and volunteering at a food bank. And also I realized that like my mom used to do this too. And that sounds crazy, but it just were normal parts of my day. And also I think things were just never explained to me. And I think that's why I am very big now on explaining everything that's happening to a child or every situation they're going to be in, because there were so many things that I was just like thrown into. If it was the peeing in the cup, if it was lying to CPS, if it was later on in life, it was like even like things that don't totally make sense to me. But, in that system, they made sense, right? You were just told what to do. Or another example I have is like I was coming home from a weekend with my dad and my mom got married just randomly, and my little kid brain, right, thinks when you get married there's a cake and a wedding. Like I watch cartoons and that's what happens. No, that's not what happened. And it was just so like it was just never explained what was happening or why. It just like it's like, okay, here's the next thing you have to deal with. A very similar thing happened. I told you obviously the situation with my dad not acknowledging me when I was first born, after the paternity test, hiding me from his family. Like there was just a day I was in the park like playing, right, with my friends, and like I was told, okay, you have to get dressed and get ready to go because you're going to go meet your sister at your dad's house. And I'm like, I have a sister? Like I feel like this sounds crazy to some people, but literally nothing was ever explained to me. Like I didn't even know I had siblings on my dad's side because no one ever mentioned it until one day I'm just like getting dropped off to meet this random adult at my dad's house. That I think sometimes was the hardest part for me, and why the trauma was, because I just never knew what was going to happen. And the only thing I did know is I didn't want to be away from my mom. So I did what I had to do. I did what I thought in my little kid brain was being asked of me to make sure that didn't happen. And I think that's something that if you've never been in that situation, it might be really, really hard to understand. But that was just my reality. And that's kind of just a small piece of the story. The other question I get a lot is about the violence that occurred in my house. I talked a little bit about it. There were plenty of times when I would see my mom with bruises on her. And again, I was told by people within the system, don't talk about them. Pretend you don't see that your mom has a black eye. And as a 5-year-old, that was just what I was told. Like, don't say anything. Mom will get sad if you say it. Just pretend like it's not there. There was that. There was my mom sometimes when she was on an active trip, or whatever you want to refer to it, when she was actively using drugs. She was never violent towards me. But I can remember her hitting other people. I can remember brothers breaking out windows because they were older than me, but they were dealing with this insane situation. And I remember one time watching my brother like break a plate glass window, and I was just standing there watching it. And it was freaking, like, again, people you love doing things that are hurting themselves or hurting other people's is a really hard thing to understand when you're that little. And then when you're told, basically, pretend it didn't happen. And the other part of that was there were never apologies in my household. So as a married woman, I have had to learn how to sit down and, like, after a disagreement, apologize and sort things out, because that was never something modeled for me as a child. These are just a couple more of the stories. Please feel free to ask me questions. I'm happy to share any part of my journey. And I will be back hopefully soon with another video. I'll talk a little bit more about my teen years and what that was like, and a little bit into my early 20s too, about kind of coming out of all this. But as always, remember, if you're a survivor too, you are not alone in this journey, and there is help and healing for everyone.